Good afternoon to all those present here in São Carlos. We're also transmitting through the channel of Irdin Publishing, so welcome all of you who are watching us. Well, we are in the cycle of public sharings, public lectures. When I come to Brazil, I take the chance to have these public lectures. Recently, on the 22nd, I had a lecture with the title, Am I Present? And as we always open to questions at the end, I'm going to record a video with some answers to those questions, and it should be posted in the next few days in the same channel of Irdin Publishing, and we will also open here today for those who have questions, and we will be answering those questions that won't be able to be answered today. And on March 14th, we'll be in São Paulo, also in a public lecture entitled as When the Wind Blows, How Will Our Candles Be? These are texts that impel our consciousnesses, right? Because we are really at a planetary, individual and collective moment that deserves some deepening from us of what we're living as we'll see it today. What no one can do for us is something very important, because it makes us understand that we need to resume the maximum potential that we have as human beings, a being that was created, and that the civilization, the society as a whole, tends to weaken this possibility of us to take right decisions, right initiatives, and have a more constructive and evolutionary development. And this starts with us observing where our inner posture, inner behavior is, and our attitudes. The life as a whole of the society almost imposes a relatively superficial behavior, and it doesn't promote and by attitude we can, from a certain point of view, understand what is my interaction with what is happening, so then I can have some attitude before that. And my posture in that attitude is to deepen into it. I must have the intention of wanting to learn how to listen, learn how to reflect, and this will change because it only depends on us. Let's always remember the title of this lecture, What No One Can Do For Us. So the whole reflection will have a line of thought to place us in this position that, well, what should I do? What do I need to do? It only depends on me, right? And this strengthens us a lot innerly, because it puts us in a place of peace as long as we are in the right posture. So this attitude, not to mature, it needs to be built on the principle of wanting to learn, being able to learn always, listening, reflecting, and the posture is where I will support on, where my consciousness will support on to have a perspective. So something could happen, as it happens to us many times a day, and where is my consciousness in perspective so that I can have a posture? And a posture is that situation that I build throughout my life, where my values are, my principles are, those things that really tell about my experience, and not what someone else or the society or any ideology tend to pressure us. Well, and for us to have this wider and more neutral posture, we need to do something that is very little stimulated today. So we receive many impulses of different origins, colors, kinds, textures, right? But if we ask ourselves, what will we do with all of this? We should make a synthesis, and how we connect all of that with our perspective of life. Well, for us to have a consistent base for this reflection of what no one can do for us, we need to land our consciousnesses on what we call as the will, and to discern or realize that the energy of will many times presents itself in different degrees, and it ends up confusing us a little, because we have something that is called the will, we have desire, and we have the wanting. And these are like levels of the same energy, but they have different intensities, and they determine on a certain degree how I'm going to find strength to do what is up to me to do, and not to depend on anyone else. This isn't something about the consciousness. I'm not speaking of anything that is external here, because externally someone could do for us. I'm talking about the widening of the consciousness and the possibility for us to build a more mature consciousness, so that in this world that is so complex today, we may have an evolutionary construction. So this energy of will is innate to our constitution. So our human architecture, in our human architecture, there is an energy that is called the will, and depending on where our consciousnesses are polarized on, that will be dressed by something mental, that is the wanting, that is innate to our own consciousnesses. Maybe we want something because we're influenced by the collectiveness, and we could desire something that is the same principle of an external influence, or even from our emotional bodies that come from origin in our emotional bodies. And these are small details about the energy of will, because we all have this energy, we feel it purely upon us, and it always comes with something mysterious, and the impulse that leads us to go forward towards something that is also mysterious, but within us we know that it's about us. It tells about us profoundly. It's like a will that comes to determine a path for us. So it's very important for us to reflect on this, for this same energy in this human architecture. It could park on something that grows from the mental plane, or desire something that comes from the emotional body, and we were like sailing in this situation. So something that is very important about what only we can do are our decisions, and our decisions are determined by the perspective, by that horizon, by that goal or objective that we eventually glimpse as a first next step or a goal for our existence. Of course that this is very broad, and it will be revealed throughout our lives, but this need of resuming the capacity of deciding for our lives, making decisions. But do we make decisions out of convenience, because it's convenient, or because of society, or some external pattern, or because of some principle of convenience? Oh, it's more comfortable for me to make this decision, so then everybody will be fine. But we exist to be well with us and the creation as a whole, or just to please others. And the most we make these questions, the faster we will feel that this will gradually approaches us and cleanses this whole blurry thing that is the influence of the collectiveness in us. But I could wonder, wow, but I made that decision. I don't even know why. We are like dragged by the collective consciousness, and we make a decision. But did that correspond to our most profound will? And this topic of decision is very important, and it is linked with the topic of will, because we as human beings, we are continuously dragged to be dissociated, and we do not manage to profoundly identify within us what our true intention before something is. So we should ask ourselves at each moment, or if you want to, in the face of a decision that we need to make, do I have a second interest in the face of a decision that I am making, or is that decision a reflection, an expression of my profound decision? So, to make a decision that is relatively independent of what others may think, but that corresponds to my consciousness. So if I'm looking for peace, if I need to have my consciousness in peace, I need to search more. If when I make a decision, if I'm making a decision out of convenience, whatever it is, or if it coincides with that profound will that we all know what it is about. And at some moment or in many moments of our lives, we lay down, we laid on our pillow at night and something was on our shoulder, but we feel something. Do you understand a burden? And this goes through a region that we called as discernment, which is something that collectively we're not being very stimulated from the education point of view, not from schools, but from life itself, how to discern. What is the filter? How can I discern if what comes to me is part of my path, of my experience? And to develop discernment also depends only on us. Only I can discern what's better, what's the best for me, what's best for me. So if I give in to a certain level so that others may make decisions of what they think it's good for me, at a certain point I'll feel like a ship wrecking, now knowing where it will go to. And this is not very peacemaking, and this is not the destiny of human experience. We are here to identify a destiny for our lives, to live something that we don't know concretely how it is, but to discern is part of this kind of impulse, what no one will be able to do for us. And in this line, we need to vigil a lot, because there is some tendency of us to choose the most convenient path, which is at a certain way, not to be consistent with our decisions. So it's more comfortable, more convenient to put the responsibility of someone else than to take on that, to assume that I need to learn how to be consistent with my own decisions. And in this line, I will notice that the energy of will, that capacity, that potential of the best that I have starts to emerge, and my life starts to change. And we don't have any narrative, any rebel narrative here about what's good in the human collectiveness. We are only here strengthening our individual potentials, which is where the collective consciousness comes from also. The more conscious, mature beings with discernment in the different levels, they will also be able to manifest the same maturity towards a more harmonious and happy humanity. So this possibility that no one can do for us is for us to be responsible for our decisions and for the consequences of those decisions. And even if eventually those decisions could lead to some less constructive situation from our interpretation, just the fact that we reflected, observed it, whatever the result of a situation is, that won't trouble us, because that will be something mature before we could carry it on. This is very different from us allowing to be dragged from one side to the other in so many sectors, in so many fields of human life, like the wind is blowing us to all sides, to all places, and it starts to be confusing. Only we can broaden our capacity for overcoming obstacles or difficulties. This is also very important because it seems that we live in a time in which we create dependency on someone or something, while we have the full potential for living, for having our experience the way it comes. If we could, as we'll see, if we could accept everything that comes to us as something that is up to us on a certain degree, this would completely change the filter on our interpretation on what happens. And this decision of overcoming acceptance can only be born from us, even if someone comforts us, strengthens us, protects us, but we will only feel protected by this energy of will within us if we manage to assume that we have this potential, the potential of broadening our capacity of overcoming. And this has a profound repercussion in the formation of character, because our character is formed by a rhythm, and that rhythm is acquired from different feelings, states of consciousness, adversities, apparent adversities, situations that are apparently contrary to our expectations, and that situation, our consciousness is matured, and our character matures from our and if we do not assume in a good way the power upon this formation, at a certain point we may be nourishing values, principles, or whatever it is, and deep down they don't correspond to what we feel it's the most correct for us deep down. And nowadays, with technologies, with social medias, with the systems of communication, it's very easy for us to be caught by that collective situation at a certain point in our lives, depending on the way of destiny that we may have. We will really see how it's an expression that I see. We will be sent away from our trajectory, and something very important that nobody can do for us. Listen carefully, because this is really important to change, to replace that belief that maybe we created that, or someone imprinted in our consciousness that I am not able. We have to replace this humbly for I will do the best possible. So this is very different for me to be comfortable and accept that I am not able to do that, it's something that doesn't exchange or strive to do the best possible. It will never be perfect, but this is very different from I am not able and just fall into inertia. And this game of I am not able or I will do the best possible, this is very important, because otherwise we would have the risk for this whole force to place us in inertia. Someday we would see ourselves without the possibilities of having initiative, because someone made us believe that we are not able to. But who said that? In the face of any situation, even if we have a trauma, that will create a filter that when something similar to the origin of that trauma, I will see, well, even in the face of this, I will do the best possible. So that energy of will, that potential that we all have, and we will feel with a very different attitude from that position that we eventually had of, no, I'm not able to do it. So reflect about this. Because also, when I do the best that I can, and if possible a little more, I will start to find out, to discover a potential that I didn't know. But if I'm always comfortable on this, that I am not able to do that, even if someone tells you, oh, you have potential, you go there and do it, but the decision to have this posture only depends on us. Is this clear? We can only discern, and this is not about a narrative for creating superheroes. We're only going to our consciousnesses to see what's really possible in our potentials, which we generally do not know, and the intention of doing the best possible. And there is a detail, or the trigger for this process is when we are true and when we are looking for the reality of things. So in this search of seeing everything truly, sincerely, in a transparent, honest way, anyway, looking for this correct expression, we'll always notice the potential, the best that we can do, and something will emerge, something very difficult from the human consciousness of today, of not losing the proportions and enter a line of inner posture that is arrogance and pride. So in this positive tension between the best that I can do, the best that is possible, and what is out of my reach, and therefore in the region of potential that I do not know the fertile of that, it is the honesty, the sincerity that will bring the possibility of having a constructive experience.
O aumento significativo das questões mentais, não?
The increase of mental illnesses, because this exists in many levels. This is not really what I'm going to talk about today, but we can notice a mental weakness because we entrust someone, or we entrust the condition of the inner process of our consciousness. So all of us as human beings, you can see it here in your body language and in your glances, how your consciousnesses are present, trying to search what this all means. So if instead of us identify and assuming to participate consciously in this process in the consciousness, if we entrust this for others, or even with all respect for the professionals that or lead with that, because before that stage there is something for our own consciousness, and only we can do that. It's obvious and necessary to mention that we're here to share our human experience and help mutually. But a good part of that process, a big part of that process needs to go through us making this decision to monitor this process in our consciousnesses. And for this, we need to discern on what I need to involve day by day so that my consciousness may have that perspective of life that I am glimpsing. But if I get involved, if I absorb dozens or hundreds of things that have nothing to do with me, when the moment comes for my consciousness to have the right flexibility, especially mental, without becoming dissociated, I will not find that flexibility. I will find some dissociation and the need for someone to replace my own consciousness and place a pattern of mental and inner organization. Can you accompany this reflection? So, only we can assume, take on and identify our process of consciousness and accompany this, and not to give it to others, because with this we can be tossed from one side to the other and lose the perspective that exists for us. And this also has to do with when we fully assumed, or as fully as possible, that everything that we experience will bring us some learning experience. And this is very different from us to depend that someone will tell us or something will tell us what we have to do, how we must be, and which potential we must develop. So the balance between the learning experience, my experience, and me depending on me to decrease my potential. For me to assume to make a decision of having the control of my experience in my hands, it doesn't mean to be independent or autonomous in this context of society that we live in different levels, from families to humanity as a whole, but something does correspond to us. Something that in the collective that wants to take us away from this focus is for when we have difficulties to, that is, something pressures our consciousnesses to a place of victimism, a plurality of our potential, and then we are waiting for someone or something to solve things out for us. This is very common everywhere in human experience, so why not bring this back that only we can do, which is to accept our own condition, decide to develop it wherever the level it is. It doesn't mean how I am or how I see myself or how others see me. The point is to accept that situation, and from that moment on to make the decision for evolving, for growing, for maturing, because this is why we are here. We are part of human experience in order to mature and to place a code of maturity for the human experience as a whole to have some more clarity and lucidity. And only we can go through the path that we chose, because here we have a subtle
Quando ingressamos em alguma experiência, vamos ali
We have a
aplicar o nosso
subtle trap
potencial,
here.
algo
When we go
restringe isso e
somewhere,
quer substituir a nossa própria experiência.
something else tries to
Pelos olhares,
replace our own
e a ideia é
experience
essa
by the
mesmo,
glances, and this is the
suscitar
idea,
movimento
is
na
for
consciência, movimento
generate a movement in the
que é o
consciousness
movimento
and
de
some
nós
inner
retomarmos
movement,
esse
which is the
potencial,
opportunity for us
tantas
for resuming
coisas, não, que já
the
refletimos aqui hoje,
potential
que só depende de
of
nós,
so many things that
em
we
geral
mentioned
nós
here today that only
cremos,
depend on us,
ou
and
algo nos faz
generally
crer que
we
está
believe,
fora
or
de
something
nós.
makes us believe that it
Estamos
is
sempre esperando
outside
que algo ou
of
alguém
us. So
mude
we are always
para
waiting for
promover
someone
bem-estar,
or
que
something
afinal
to
de contas
change
não
to
dependeria de
promote
nada,
a well-being that
porque a paz
wouldn't depend on
que estamos na
anything,
nossa
because
consciência não depende de ninguém,
the peace that
nem
we
de
look in
nada.
our consciousnesses do not depend on anyone or
Claro que estamos
anything.
tratando aqui de uma
Of
energia
course,
da
that we are
vontade,
talking about the will
quando
of will
estamos
here,
dentro dessa vontade,
and when we
desse
are
princípio de
in the
vontade,
energy
vamos
of
descobrir
this
que
will,
algo que nós não
we'll
sabemos o que é, está conduzindo esse
see
processo
that something that
dentro
we
de
don't know
nós
what it is
e vai abrindo
leading
os
this
caminhos
process
e
within us,
esclarecendo toda
and
essa
it will open
situação.
the paths and clarify this whole situation. Well,
Nós temos uma tendência também
we
de
also have a
delegar fora
tendency
de nós, não, a possibilidade
of
de
delegating
compreender
outside
o
of us
significado do
the
nosso próprio
possibility
caminho,
for understanding the meaning of our own path or what
como
happens
se
to
nós
us.
não
It's as
crêssemos de
if
tudo,
we
não
didn't quite
acreditássemos de
believe,
tudo, ou não tivéssemos
we
ainda
didn't fully
despertado de
believe
tudo,
or
para
hadn't
uma pronta
awakened
capacidade de
fully
poder sim
for
compreender
the
o que se passa conosco.
own capacity of understanding what is going on with us. So we should ask
Cada de
ourselves,
nós está vivendo esse processo,
is each one of us
está
living
buscando
this
compreender
process,
a partir do seu próprio recurso,
trying to
seja
understand for
o
our
recurso
own
interno,
resources,
mas
whatever
se
inner
estiver
resource we
fazendo o
have,
máximo
but
possível,
if you're doing
querendo não fazer
the
o que
best
ninguém pode
possible
fazer
and
por
wanting
nós,
to do what no
clareza
one can
começa a
do for
emergir
us, that clarity will start to emerge
por tipo de atividade
So,
que eu também desenvolvo
through a
com
kind of
missões
activity that
humanitárias,
always
não?
develop with
Temos contato com
humanitarian
muitas
missions.
pessoas e muitos
We are in
profissionais
contact
nessa
with
área
many people and many
da
professionals in
situação
this area
do potencial
of
mental humano.
the
Nós vemos como
situation
a mente
of
humana está fragilizada.
the human
Fragilizada
mental
por
potential.
minimamente não
We see
pensar,
how humanity is
refletir,
weakened
não buscar
for
ver
not
diferentes
reflecting, for
perspectivas,
not looking for different
não buscar fazer
perspectives,
uma síntese,
for not trying to make a synthesis, right?
sem amadurecer
So
através
without
desses caminhos da nossa mente humana.
maturing through these
Vamos
paths,
chegar num ponto
our
que
mental,
nitidamente que é muito importante chegar
our
nesse
human
limite,
minds will reach
depois de
that
pensar,
limit,
refletir,
because after
analisar,
thinking,
por que não
reflecting,
julgar no
analyzing,
bom sentido,
why
entendendo,
not to
não?
judge in a
Nós vamos chegar
good
nesse
way,
limite
in a
e vai ter
way,
potencial
and we'll reach
que
that
vai emergir
limit,
de dentro de
and
nós
there will
se
be a
chama
potential
intuição.
that will emerge from within us that is called intuition.
Mas se nós não
But if we
fizermos
do not
exercício rítmico
have
na
this
própria
rhythm
consciência do que só nós
exercise
podemos fazer,
in
a nossa
the consciousness
intuição
that we
nem poderá
are the
ser
only ones who can
reconhecida,
do it,
que estaremos muito acostumados sempre a escutar de fora
we'll be
alguém
very
nos dizer
always used to
como temos
listen
que ser, ou como
for
temos que
others
não
to say
ser,
how we should be
ou
or
como
how
não
we should
temos
not
que não
be
ser,
or how
uma
we
grande
shouldn't
confusão,
not be.
não?
It's
Quando seria muito
big
simples.
confusion.
O que a nossa
While we
consciência
should
não
be
está
very
querendo
simple,
dizer?
what our consciousnesses are
Se
trying to
fizéssemos essa
say,
pergunta
and
um
if
pouco
we
mais
made
a
this
miúde,
question
veríamos que essa
more often,
compreensão
we would
do
see
que vai
that
acontecendo
this
conosco
comprehension of what
vai se
happens to
tornando
us
como o
will
próprio caminho
become
que temos
like
que fazer.
the own path that we need to go through.
O caminho vai acontecendo, a compreensão vai emergindo, o discernimento vai organizando essa experiência.
So discernment will
vamos
organize that
planificando
experience, and
no
that
bom
will be
sentido. E vamos tornando
filled in
ser
a good
seguro,
way, and I will become a secure
consciente
being and
até
aware,
da
even
minha
aware
colaboração diante da
of my
sociedade.
collaboration before society.
Por exemplo, algo que vocês podem
For instance,
monitorar
something that you
nesse
can
exato
monitor at this very moment,
Isso só cada de nós pode fazer.
and only
E
each
onde
one
está
of us
nossa
can do it.
consciência nesse momento?
Where is our consciousness at this
Então, se
moment?
formos honestos, vamos
So if we
perceber
are
que algo
honest,
está
we will
presente aqui
notice that something
e
is
algo
present
está em
here
outras
and
situações,
something
assim.
is in other
E muitas vezes
situations.
não é por mal, nem porque não queiramos
And many
estar
times
aqui,
it's not
ou porque não tínhamos o
with
interesse
a
de
bad
estar aqui,
intention or because
ou
we
por
didn't
algum
want
motivo.
to be here or for
De
some
novo,
reason. It's
essa
because,
força
again,
centrífuga do
this
pensamento coletivo vai atraindo a nossa mente, vai
strength,
plasmando
this
muitos códigos no
centrifuge
nosso subconsciente,
strength
e a uma certa
imprints
por
many
algum
codes
tipo
in
de
our
estímulo,
subconscious,
até
and
mesmo
at
uma
a certain
palavra
point,
que é dita
out of
aqui,
some stimulation or
associada
even a
com um
word
estímulo recebido
that is said
4
here
horas
is
atrás,
associated
aquele
with some
emerge
stimulation that
aquele
we
código
received
lá
4
que eu
hours
escutei
ago
4 horas
that
atrás.
makes it emerge, that
Então
code
imagine, nós
emerge.
recebemos
So
por
imagine
dia dezenas
we
ou centenas de
receive
impulsos, mas
hundreds
se eu
of
não aprendo,
impulses.
isso é uma decisão minha, de cada um de nós, não ser inteligente, discernindo e atento para filtrar
Discerning and being attentive to
deve ou não fazer
filter
parte da minha
what
consciência,
should and what shouldn't be
quase
part
que
of
se
my
apodera de mim
consciousness. This will
e chega a se apoderar até mesmo da minha vontade.
take control of me and even of my will.
Quem aqui foi no
Who
mercado um dia comprar papel higiênico
has never
e saiu com
been
o
to
carrinho cheio?
the market just to buy
Íamos
paper
comprar, não,
and
sabonete,
you
quando
left the
vimos,
market with your cart
fazendo
filled,
conta para ver se dá para pagar,
full,
porque
ma-
de onde veio
calculating
aquela atração
to see if
toda
you could buy
de termos
all
aquilo
that.
tudo
Where does
num
this
carrinho de
attraction
supermercado,
come
quando
from
em
for us to
princípio
buy
não
all
era
of
aquela a
that when
intenção. Por essas informações coletivas que
that
nós
wasn't
recebemos,
the
e que quando vemos
initial
aquilo,
intention?
o circuito fecha e temos
When we
aquela
live that,
impressão
the
de que
circuit
aquilo necessita
closes and we
ser
have the impression that those things must be
transfiramos isso
must be
para
ours.
códigos de conduta, para
Tran-
atitudes,
And
para adesão
think
a
about
maneiras de
this,
ser,
about our attitudes, ways of being,
estereótipos de conduta ou de
stereotypes
vestimento,
of
de tudo
conduct,
isso.
clothing,
Então,
and
tipo,
all
nos
that.
olhamos, mas eu
So
não sou
one day
mesmo,
we look,
não sei o
and
que eu
then
quero,
today I
não sei
don't
pra
know
onde eu
who I
estou
am,
indo,
I don't know what
não
I
sei em
want,
que
I don't know where I'm going,
princípios baseio minha vida.
I don't know
E é isso que nós queremos
on
para nós, seguramente
which
não.
principles I base my life
Creio
on.
que todos aqui querem ter uma experiência autêntica,
I think that everyone here
transparente, sincera, que tenha
might
nascido
want
do
to
seu
have an
próprio interior.
authentic experience that may
E essa
have emerged from your
decisão, então,
own inner world.
de
And this
discernir
decision
e
of
colocar a
discerning
nossa consciência em tudo,
and
só
having
pode
our
ser
consciousnesses in everything
tomado por
must
cada de nós.
only be
E se
made by
estivermos
each one of
bem
us.
conscientes
And if we are
disso,
very conscious
desse
of this,
conjunto de reflexões,
of this
quando vem o
collection of
impulso
reflections,
dissonante
when
com isso,
a
não que eu
dissonating
desenho
impulse comes,
para esse momento da minha vida, a minha própria consciência não vai aceitar
my
aquilo.
own consciousness will not
Vai
accept
filtrar,
that,
aquilo vai
or it
passar
will
por mim, mas não vai
filter
ficar
that, will
retido em
go
mim.
through me, but it won't be
Isso vai ter muita
retained in me.
diferença.
And
A
this
partir
is
desse
very
momento,
different.
eu vou começar a atrair
From
aquilo
that
que me
moment on, I will
corresponde.
start to
Com o
attract
tempo,
what is
eu
up
vou
to
ter
me,
essa experiência
and with
humana
time, I will have
de
this
dentro para fora,
human experience from inside
plena,
out,
independente do que eu creio ser bom
filled
para mim.
and independent from what I believe to be good for me.
Algo muito importante que
Something
nós,
very
em
important
geral,
that
não
we
damos muita
generally
atenção,
do not pay attention at
estamos
is
sensíveis às
to be
necessidades
sensitive
internas.
to others' needs.
Porque vivemos num pensamento
Because
coletivo
we live
bastante
in a
egoísta,
collective
onde temos que nos apropriar de
consciousness
coisas,
that
né?
is very
Nos
selfish, or we
apropriar
need to
de ideias, de pensamentos, de
own
sentimentos,
things,
sempre
even
nós
feelings,
no
thoughts.
centro. E vivemos
We
hoje
always
quase 9
place us in
bilhões
the
de
center, and
indivíduos.
we
Mas
have
será que com aquelas dezenas
we nearly have
com
9
as quais nós
billion
convivemos, nós estamos
9 billions
sensíveis
individuals
à
on the planet,
necessidade
but
dos
are we
demais?
sensitive to
E essa
others' needs?
decisão de
And
estarmos
this
sensíveis à
decision
necessidade do outro
of
só
being
pode ser
needy,
tomada por nós. Experimente no resto do tempo, que resta do dia de hoje, quem quiser sentir, toma essa decisão.
make this
Quem
decision
esteja diante de mim,
with
eu estarei
whomever is
atento, se tem
before
alguma
me. I
necessidade
will be
que eu possa
attentive
atender.
if they
Não
have
ficar em
some
cima
need that
do
I
outro,
can
assim,
help
não,
them,
porque
not
isso
to
é
be
muito
on
constrangedor.
someone,
Mas
because
nós
that
estamos
is
sensíveis para
embarrassing,
perceber
but
realmente se
to
ali
be sensitive
o
if
universo colocou diante
the
de mim alguém
universe placed someone before
que
me,
eventualmente eu posso
because
colaborar com o
I
que ele está
can
experimentando,
eventually
ou
collaborate
atender
with
alguma
what they're
necessidade
going
também
through,
externa
or
que eles tenham.
try
E essa
to
decisão de estarmos
help
sensíveis a
with
isso
some
só
external
pode
need that
partir de nós.
they may
Ninguém
have.
pode nos
And this
obrigar
can
a isso.
only start from
Ninguém
us,
nos
emerge from
sensibilizar
us.
a isso.
Nobody can oblige us to do this or
Isso
make
é muito
us
importante.
sensible enough for this. This is very important.
Então, Para concluir e por abrir para as perguntas, vamos ver
So,
agora
to
que
conclude and then
o que nos
open to
tira
questions,
do foco
what
dessa
removes
possibilidade
us from the
de
focus of
fazer
this
o que ninguém
possibility
poderá fazer
of
por
doing
nós?
what
O
no
que
one
nos
can do
distrai
for
disso?
us?
Ou
What
mesmo nos
distracts
impede
us
disso?
or
E muitas vezes é bom
impedes
saber
us?
também
Because many times it's
o que não
also good to
fazer,
know what not
porque em vez de
to
eu não
do.
saiba o que fazer,
Because
se eu
even if I
evito
do
o que
not
não
know
fazer,
what I should do, if I avoid
inevitavelmente
what I
um dia eu vou saber o que
shouldn't
fazer.
do,
Não faz um
I
pouco
will
oriental,
eventually
não?
know
Entendo.
what to do. I know
Mas é bom
this
que a
is
mente
very
escorrega um pouco assim, sem querer, a gente
Eastern,
entende, né?
but
Sai do raciocínio e entende sem entender.
we can understand.
Né? Pronto. Claro, é o conhecimento direto. Você entende,
Of course,
quando
it's
a mente vai
direct
tentar
thought
entender,
we
já não
understand, but
entende de
when
novo.
the mind tries to
Mas ficou
understand,
ali
then we
uma
don't
semente
understand
de, eu
anymore.
sei o que é isso.
But we
Isso
have
é
a
o-
seed
não.
there.
Quis
Okay, I
dizer
know
que
how it is.
evitando o que nós
I
podemos
meant
evitar,
by avoiding what
nós
we can
chegaremos
avoid,
inevitavelmente
we will
ao que nós temos que
inevitably
viver.
reach what we
Simplesmente por
should do,
evitar o
what we should
supérfluo, por
live,
exemplo, que
just
não
for
nos diz
avoid
respeito.
what is superfluous, for instance.
Então, o primeiro ponto que nos ajudaria
So the
muito a
first point that
retomar
would help
essa
us
energia
to
da
resume
vontade
this
profunda e
energy
individual,
of
não no mau
profound and
sentido,
individual
é
will
nos
in the
evitarmos a
good
superficialidade
way,
e a
is to
curiosidade.
avoid superficiality and
Estou
curiosity.
curioso por
So
algo,
if I am
curioso
curious
não é um
about
interesse
something,
profundo, é uma curiosidade. Eu vou ver o que está acontecendo
curiosity is
ali,
not
eu vou
profound
ver o que se
interest.
trata
I just want to see what's
Então,
going
isso
on there. So
é
this
uma atitude um pouco superficial.
is
E
a
nessa
superficial
superficialidade,
attitude,
sem
and in
querer,
that
eu vou
superficiality,
enfraquecendo a minha vontade
without
de
wanting
estar
to,
onde eu
I will
tenho que estar
weaken
e fazer,
the
sentir e
will
pensar
of
o que
being
eu
where I
quero
should
fazer,
be,
sentir e pensar. Porque
where
senão
it should be,
arrisca, não?
think, and feel.
Imaginem o Sol, a nossa
Imagine
consciência,
the sun, our
um tanto de
consciousness,
asteroide que são os
and a group
objetos
of
de curiosidade
asteroids
que
that
nos
are
chegam
the objects of
dezenas
curiosity
de
that
vezes por dia.
come
Arrisca de eu me dar conta em um
many
momento
times a
no meio
day.
do fogo cruzado, não de coisa que não tem nada a ver comigo.
I just
Só
see
por ter me envolvido
something that
curiosamente
doesn't have
ou
much to do with me,
superficialmente
but
com
just
uma situação
out of
ou
curiosity
com algum
with
estado de
some
consciência.
situation or state of consciousness.
Algo que nos impede, dificulta também.
Something
Estar muito atento.
that also impedes
São
us
sentimentos coletivos.
are the collective thoughts.
Nós sabemos e podemos sentir
We know and we
diferentes
can
graus
feel in
a
different
força que tem a
degrees
comunicação.
the strength that
Como a
communication
comunicação
has,
pública,
how
digamos
a
assim, não?
public communication,
Sociais,
let's say,
internet, jornais,
social
tudo
medias,
isso,
the
a força
internet,
que isso tem.
the
Filmes, novelas, como
news,
isso molda a nossa
soap
consciência,
operas,
nosso ponto de
all of
vista.
that,
Então,
how
nós
those
precisamos
things
estar atentos
mold
aos
our
sentimentos
consciousnesses in some points of
coletivos,
view,
e conforme
and
os
we must
pensamentos coletivos também, que de
be
todo
attentive with
não dizem
these
respeito à
collective
nossa
feelings and
consciência.
thoughts that
O
are
que vocês
not
devem
about
conviver
our
com alguém,
consciousnesses.
ou talvez
You
identificarem cada
might live with
de vocês
someone
também,
or identify
algum momento que começamos a
you,
assumir uma
the
atitude,
moment in which
um
we start to assume
ou uma indignação,
some need,
uma
some
coisa que não veio
indignation
de nós,
that didn't come
veio
from us.
plasmada,
It
veio
came imprinted,
imposta,
it
quase que
came
imposta,
almost
por esse
imposed
consciente coletivo.
by that
E que nós, querendo
conscious
ou não,
collective, and
somos
we,
parte
wanting it
dele.
or not, we are part
Nós
of it.
estamos imersos no coletivo,
We are immersed
mesmo que não
in the
tomando
collective,
consciência desses
even
códigos
if
coletivos
not
diretamente.
being aware of
O nosso
these
corpo mental,
codes.
a nossa mente, está
Our
imersa na mesma
minds
faixa de
are in
vibração
the same
do mental coletivo
degree
planetário.
of vibration.
Então é por isso que nós recomendamos
So this is
para quem
why
busca
we
uma
recommend
vida
for
mais
those who
harmoniosa, baseada
are
em
looking
princípios
for a
mais
more
profundos,
harmonious
não? Buscar uma
way
certa
of living,
distância, não? De tudo
to
aquilo que não
keep,
nasce,
to look
não
for
seja
some
coincidente
distance
com
to
os
all of
valores
those things
que
that
entende ser corretos
do not
para si,
coincide with the values
a
that
uma certa altura
we
começar
have, the correct
a tocar,
values that we have for
podemos
ourselves,
chamar de
and then we'll be able
matrizes,
to
arquétipos,
touch the
sentimentos, pensamentos
matrices,
superiores que existem.
archetypes,
A consciência humana tem um
superior
potencial
feelings and
interno
thoughts, because
superior,
those things
inato,
exist.
independente de
We
qualquer
have it innate,
filosofia,
regardless of
religião
any
ou
philosophy,
misticismo.
religion,
A consciência humana em
or
si,
the
ela
human
abriga e
consciousness
alberga
itself
matrizes que estão dentro de nós.
has
Isso
matrices that
não é
are within
adquirido,
us.
isso é
This
inato
is
à
not
consciência humana
acquired, this is
original.
innate to human consciousness
Então,
originally.
de novo, que
So,
pode nos tirar do
again,
foco do que
what
só nós
can
podemos fazer, essa busca por
remove
isso
us
está
from
no
the
nosso
focus
profundo,
of what
não?
those things that
Não
only we
entregarmos
can
isso
do
assim
is to be
para a consciência coletiva.
in the profound and not
Algo também
give it
muito
to
normal
collective
na
consciousness.
consciência
Something
humana é nós
very normal also
transferirmos
is for us to
responsabilidade para os
transfer,
demais.
to
Ah, eu
give
sou assim
responsibility
porque o
for
outro
others.
fez tal
Oh,
coisa.
I am like this because
Tudo
that
bem.
person did
O
that.
outro pode ter feito algo
Okay, maybe
que
that
ativou em você
person
uma reação.
could have done something that
Está te
triggered a
incomodando,
reaction
é a
in
sua
you, and
reação
what
diante
is
do que o outro
troubling
fez,
you
não
is
exatamente o que
the
o outro
reaction
fez.
that
O
you're
outro
having
está
in the
lá
face
da
of
sua
what
consciência.
those
Não
other
faria
people
sentido.
made.
Ele só tem esse poder de lhe influenciar.
They only
E você
have the
está
power
dando
of
a ele esse poder.
the power to influence you because you're giving them the power.
Retomar essa
So we need to
possibilidade de
resume
filtrar
this
isso,
possibility
não?
of
E
filtering
saber
this
que o outro
and
faz
knowing
o que
that
fizer, eu, na minha busca de
whatever others may
identidade,
do, me in my
coerência
search for
com as minhas
honesty,
decisões
coherence
internas, eu fico firme
with my
nisso.
inner decisions,
Na
I
minha
will stick to this,
postura
and
e
in
atitude,
my
como vimos no início,
posture and
eu
attitude,
interajo
as
com
we
isso,
saw in the beginning,
não?
I'll
Devolvendo o
interact with
código
that,
daquilo que está dentro de mim, independente
giving
do
the
que o
code
outro
for
fez,
what
porque isso é uma
is within
responsabilidade
me,
dele,
because that
ou
is
do
his
coletivo, ou da
responsibility,
sociedade. Eu
or
não
the
sou
collective, the
obrigado,
society.
não?
I am not obliged
A entrar, digamos, nessa
to
situação
enter this
sem esse
situation without
Então,
this filter.
nós estamos sendo
So we
levados
are
a
being
sempre
taken
transferir a responsabilidade para os demais, como se nada pudesse ser feito por
to
nós.
give
Essa está por
responsibility
trás
for
dessa
others
mensagem
as
coletiva.
we as
Isso é
if we
muito
couldn't do
perigoso,
anything for
se nós vamos
ourselves.
com isso
And this
perdendo a
is
nossa
very dangerous
identidade
because
profunda.
with this
Vamos
we'll lose
entregar
our
para
profound
algo, para
identity,
alguém,
and
a
then we
nossa
will
possibilidade
surrender our
de ter uma experiência
possibility for
autêntica
having
que vem do
an
mais
authentic
profundo,
experience that
que
comes
não
from deep
dependa, ainda que interaja, mas não depende
within
de tudo
us and
que
not
está acontecendo fora de mim.
depending on what is happening outside of me.
Eu sei que isso é um ponto bastante maduro,
I know
mas é
that this is a very mature
importante,
point, but this
porque
impulse is
especialmente os
important
jovens, não?
because especially the
Numa
youth, the
etapa
young
ativa
people that are in some
de
active
influência na
stage
sociedade,
of
os mais
influence
maduros, não? Como
in
vamos
society,
chamar,
the most
têm um
mature
papel
ones
importantíssimo na
that have
sociedade
a very
também,
important
que não
role in
nos
society as
acomodemos
whole for us not
nessa
to
situação que acaba criando uma impotência, não?
the situation that
Transferir
ends up creating
responsabilidade
some
para o outro,
impotency, because if
para
I
alguém, para
give
uma
a
situação,
responsibility for
se torna
others
impotente
or for
automaticamente,
another
porque fica
situation,
claro,
I will become
porque eu
impotent
dou toda a
automatically
possibilidade que eu tive de
because
colaboração
I
positiva,
give all of
não?
the possibility that I had, and
Transferindo essa
I will
responsabilidade para
transfer
fora de mim.
that responsibility
Outra coisa
to
que dificulta
someone
bastante esse processo como um
somewhere
todo
outside of
é
me. Something
nós
else that
ficamos muito
makes it
presos,
difficult is for us to be
apegados
very
às nossas
attached
próprias reações
to our
mentais e
own
emocionais.
mental and emotional reactions.
Então, quando nós demoramos demais,
So when
nós nos
we
damos ao luxo quase de ficarmos presos a alguma reação que temos em algum momento.
So when we are stuck to some reaction that we had at some point, it's as if
Lenha seca,
some dry wood
então temos que
in
ser
a fire.
ágeis
So we must be very
ao identificarmos
skillful
alguma
when
reação
we
mental ou
identify
emocional,
some
imediatamente
emotional or
vamos
mental
buscar levantar
reaction.
nosso ponto
We
mais alto
should
de consciência,
immediately
deixar aquela
try
reação
to seek
passe,
the wildest point of
naquele
our
ponto de
consciousness,
consciência, porque isso vai
allow that to
consolidando
pass, because
a
that
nossa
is
natureza humana
consolidating
profunda.
our deep human
Se
nature.
desenvolvermos, não?
If
Damos
we
demasiada atenção às
involve
nossas reações,
or pay a lot of
mentais e
attention to our
emocionais,
reactions,
nossas
mental or emotional
atitudes
ones, our
tenderão
attitudes
a se
will
nivelar
tend
com
to
aquele
be
impulso que nós
in the
recebemos que
same
gerou
level
aquela
of
reação.
the impulses that we received and that
Percebe como é
generated that
importante
reaction.
sair
Do you
disso, subir um pouquinho mais?
realize how
Vem
important it
uma
is
coisa
to
me
step
eleva,
out
daqui
of
a pouco
that
ele
and
passa,
elevate a little
não?
more, so those things
Mesmo
will
que toque a
pass
minha
under
consciência,
me,
tá bem, mas eu
even
estou
if
num
they
outro lugar.
touch my consciousness a bit?
Não um lugar
Okay, but
superior,
I'll be
soberbo,
somewhere
não.
else, not to
Numa
be
perspectiva
somewhere superior,
de
to be
aprender
superb.
a interagir
No,
com aquela situação
I
de
should
maneira
learn how to
consciente e
interact with that
construtiva.
situation in a
Mas se eu me permito
constructive way.
demasiado envolvimento
But if I
nisso,
allow a lot
eu
of
me perco dessa energia da
involvement
vontade
with that, I
e vou
will
ser
get lost
mais
from the energy
sendo
of
jogado,
will, and I
jogado
will
para
be what more dragged upside down.
E para concluir,
And to conclude,
nós precisaríamos
we would need
realmente refletir
to
se
really
nós
reflect
confiamos no potencial
if
que nós
we
temos, e cada um de nós tem muitos potenciais.
trust in the potentials that we have, and each one of us have many potentials.
Então,
Most of them are
eu me
unknown.
considero
So let us reflect, do I consider myself as a being with potentials? I'm talking about a potential in the consciousness. So do I identify myself some potential, or am I not so sure that I have a potential because someone bombarded me with so many thoughts that I don't believe that I can do it anymore? Do you know anyone in this situation? Many, right? In that circle of influence, those things come, which is also something that we call as bullying. So that will decrease our potential, it will cause inertia, and where will we get? So do we trust that we have a potential and that we need to discover to or do I think that I do not have a potential? If it is so, I need some profound healing and that I need to go through this reflection. And actually the last point is for us, is us losing time, wasting time with things that are not up to us. This is hard, huh? And it's important for us to reflect on this because our time should really be preciously used with our priorities. And we would see how this that we say, I don't have time for that, we would say, oh, I have so much potential and I could do many things. But as I end up wasting a lot of time with things that are not to us, think about today, how many times we saw ourselves involved with things that didn't have anything to do with our consciousness. And if we start to dry that situation out, we'll start to feel how all of that only we can do will start to emerge, and we'll be able to see it with much more. So if you take antioxidants, it's just enough to resume the potential that of only those things that you can do. Even the antioxidants, our inner metabolism active in the consciousness will make us assimilate antioxidants, because if I take some antioxidants in my life, my posture, my attitudes do not coincide with some antioxidant posture that is constructive, it's not enough to take that because that won't be assimilated. The code that determines my experience is in my consciousness. So we need to reflect on all this. Well, this has been a storm of impulses, right? Those who may want to listen to this again, it will be published on the channel of Irdin Publishing. It's already online. And now we're going to open for the questions that you may have here, those who are present here, and eventually someone in the chat, and the question will be read. We have a microphone. If anyone has a question, you can use the microphone so that everyone in the transmission can also accompany. Good afternoon, Friar. Maybe my question is within this idea of understanding that the discernment that we must have to make our decisions depend a lot on a very great degree of neutrality, and I understand that we need to be strong. When I say we, I'm referring to myself. What would be the best way for me to understand or know that I am not influencing that decision? Well, we just like nature, like life, it's a process. Everything is a process. And in this process, it would be very natural for us to gradually mature. And for us to mature, we have the resources that our subtle bodies have, which are the feelings, reflections, analysis, to see different perspectives,
não sermos impulsivos.
not to be impulsive.
Então, isso vai construindo, vai
So this
amadurecendo
all
essa
builds and
neutralidade e
matures
esse
this
discernimento.
neutrality and discernment.
Então,
So
nada na nossa experiência humana vai
nothing in
acontecer
our human
abruptamente.
experience will happen
E se-
abruptly.
E quando
And
acontecer,
when
ou
it
terá
happens, it
sido
will
processo no inconsciente,
either have
então
been
teve
a process in the
só que
unconscious,
emergiu
it
abruptamente,
was a process but
ou foi
emerged
processo
abruptly,
menos
or
consciente.
it was a less conscious
sempre será
process, but it will always
E a
be a process.
neutralidade, ela só
And
pode
neutrality can
emergir
only
depois que,
emerge
ao longo,
after,
esse
throughout
ritmo que eu
this
comentava
rhythm
anteriormente,
that I was mentioning
no contato
before,
com tudo que nós entramos
the
em
contact with
contato em
everything
muitos
that
níveis,
we
nós vamos
get in
aprendendo
contact
a
with
não
all
nos
the
envolver.
levels, we learn not to get
Então,
involved.
uma chave pouco mais concreta
So a
para
more
sua pergunta
concrete
é o
key
não
for
envolvimento.
your
Porque se
question
eu me
is
envolvo, eu posso estar
not to be
me
involved.
envolvendo
Because if I get involved, I will be involving for different reasons.
ou ideológicas,
Ideological
ou porque é da minha
ones,
família,
or because
ou
they
porque é da
are
minha nação,
about my family or
ou
about
porque
my
vai
nation,
alinhado com
or
meus
because
princípios.
it's aligned with my principles. This is some involvement. So we have
Mas para estarmos neutros,
different ones, but
discernir.
for us to be
E
neutral
atenção,
and discern and pay
isso vale
attention,
para cada momento.
this is for
Porque
each
pode
moment,
ser que
this
algo
works for
seja
each
muito bom
moment,
para
but
nós hoje,
because it could be that something's very good
faça
for us
exercício de
today.
discernimento com neutralidade, bom, isso é bom para mim hoje. Mas amanhã pode
You
não
can
ser
see that
mais.
this is good for us today, but
Isso
maybe
inquieta
tomorrow it
muito
won't be
também
anymore.
a consciência humana.
And
Para
this,
não compreender definitivamente a imutabilidade dessa experiência que nós vivemos aqui. Então, nós queremos pegar uma coisa no essência,
So,
aquilo se dilui porque a vida não pode
that
ser
will be
aprisionada.
deleted because life can be
E o
imprisoned.
amadurecimento pressupõe,
And
como eu dizia antes,
maturing
capacidade de fazer síntese e dessa síntese fazer
is
uma outra
about
experiência.
us
Ali um
being able to
metabolismo
make a
que gera uma
synthesis
substância nova e ali vamos
that
para uma outra
generates a new
experiência.
substance, and then we'll go to a different experience, and this
Uma vida que vai se expandindo
is a life
continuamente.
that will be expanded
Então, a
continuously.
tendência à cristalização
So the
vai na
tendency to
contramão da
crystallization
neutralidade e do
goes
discernimento.
against
cristalizo em
discernment, because I'll be
exemplo bem concreto para não ficar dúvida. Tá?
crystallized in something. I'll say a
Maçã é
very
bom não sei para quê.
concrete example. Oh,
Aí eu entendo,
apples are
eu
good for
decido
something,
que
and
eu
then
vou
I
maçã
decided
todos
I
os
will
dias,
eat
porque eu
apples
li,
every day because I
eu
read
compreendi, eu
and I
experimentei,
understood
maçã é bom
and
para tal
I
coisa.
experienced
Mas
that
se
apple is
amanhã,
good for this.
por algum
But
motivo,
if
o meu
tomorrow,
mecanismo
for some reason, my
entender ou
mechanism
perceber,
understands
eu deveria
or
deixar de comer
realizes
maçã,
that I should
mas
stop
se
eating
mentalmente
apples, but
e
if
emocionalmente
mentally
ficar fixo
and
naquilo,
emotionally I am
percebe?
fixed on that, attached to that, do you understand how we
Não, ele
easily
falou que é
fall
bom
into
tomar
this?
vitamina, não sei o
Oh,
quê,
someone told
e
me
eu fico
that it's good to
naquela
take
crença,
some
uma
vitamin,
crença,
and I just remain in that
plasmada, inclusive, com muita
belief that is
violência
very
na nossa consciência,
violently
tantas.
imprinted in our consciences,
Então, eu não
among
posso
many
mais
others, so
discernir.
I can no longer discern.
Então, eu costumo dizer assim, minhas respostas
So,
não têm ponto final.
I
Elas promovem uma outra
say,
reflexão. E é isso
my
mesmo, porque a ideia é suscitar
answers do
mesmo
not have
crescimento na
a
consciência.
final period. It leads
Não
us
uma
to
resposta mental,
a
bom,
different
entendi. Não,
reflection.
você não entendeu nada. Você entendeu, eu me
Okay, you
sentiria
could
mal,
say,
ok?
well, I understood. If you said you understood, I
Então,
would be
vamos ver uma
feeling
reflexão.
bad.
Isso eu
It's
te
to
disse aqui.
It's to promote some reflection.
Boa tarde, Frei. Prazer em vê-lo mais uma
Good
vez.
afternoon, Friar.
O senhor
It's
realmente,
good to see you once again. You,
sua aula,
in your
na sua
lesson,
palestra,
in your lecture,
mostra uma importante
is showing
parte
an
da vida,
important point of human life,
capacidade de
which
reflexão.
is the capacity for reflection.
E a gente percebe,
And
o
we
senhor
can
falou
realize,
sobre isso durante a sua palestra,
you have talked about this in
primeiro,
your
essa fragmentação
lecture.
de
First,
valores,
this fragmentation of
o
values
fato de que há uma
and the fact
centrifugação,
that there is
capacidade humana de se concentrar.
the centrifugation of human capacity on concentrating on values. And I think a lot about this. I am 85 years old, and as we grow older, we get more connected to this point of reflection, because you were saying that people have a very great capacity for increasing the capacities of the brains, the right side of the brain, but
que a sociedade
the
sofre
pressures that humanity
pressões, muitas
suffers
vezes
is
a gente
very
pensa,
great. The
bom,
pressures that sometimes we
são
think, well,
pressões muitas vezes
those
caóticas,
many
como
times chaotic
redes
pressures,
sociais,
as well as
televisões,
social medias, the
etc.
television, the
Mas às
news,
vezes não são
etc.
caóticas, não,
But
são
sometimes they're not
dirigidas
as chaotic. They're also
porque
directed
parte grande
because
dos 9
a great
bilhões
part
de
of the
seres
9
humanos
billion
que vivem nesse planeta
of human beings that
são
live on this planet are
levados por esse
led by
vendaval
this
enorme
wind, this
de
big wind
processos
of processes
que impede essa reflexão.
that prevent this
E é
reflection.
isso que eu acho que está
And this is what I think
a
that
sociedade
is
humana no planeta.
destructing the human society on the planet. It's a huge chaos in the first place, and then directed processes that are changing a lot. So, and unenabling people to think. So when you say that it's necessary to reflect about this, the question is, how should I make this reflection? For example, I make a daily reflection in my path and I say, what am I going to do today? What are my steps? Because I use a lot of the expression of Talmudi from Israel, which says the following: be careful with your thoughts because they will be made into words. Take care about your words because they will be made into actions. Be careful about your actions because they will become your habits, and be careful with your habits because they will mold your character. This is what you said. So how can we stimulate this reflection groupally or individually? Because I think this is the central point. Because the pressure of modern life, this whole collection, which is either chaotic or directed, prevent people for having the capacity for thinking for themselves and developing the biggest instrument, which is the brain. In the human species, the main process that human species has is the software that we have in our brain, and therefore I would like to know how I can make this reflection, how I should direct in the middle of this great storm that we're going through. Thank you a lot for your question, Professor. Well, first of all, you were very generous for saying that a part of humanity is being led, right? We are within a very violent collective manipulation. It is very violent. And as always, the solution is simple. Any solution that is proposed by our own being that didn't depend on each one of us would be a mistaken decision and manipulative. Look, we have a consciousness, right? A consciousness that expresses itself in its mental, the more intuitive part, and deeper levels. We have an emotional consciousness that is dragged or is interacting with the environment and generates this whole process. And going to the beginning of the lecture, we have in our architecture the energy of will, and we should of us asking ourselves, would I take the situations in the positive way? So the greater those things try to pressure me, that will be more fuel to nourish my aspiration. But this is my inner intimate position. This is indirectly linked to the degree of awakening of each one, and unfortunately the human consciousness as a whole only stops to make this reflection in two situations: out of tiredness or out of suffering. I know, and I also think that you might know, and we may always know, that we only stop when we were tired or we were suffering. In other words, if you don't go for good, you go for bad.
Mas é o tipo de yoga, chamemos
But
assim,
it is the kind
cada
of
decide
yoga
viver.
that each one decides to live.
Então, me parece que o mais importante
So the most
cada
important
viver
is for each
de
one
acordo com a sua própria consciência
to
e ser
live
exemplo.
according to their own consciousness and be an
Por isso nós
example.
somos exemplo.
Because as
Isso
we are
trabalha
examples,
muito no
that
invisível.
works in
E aqui
the
não vai nenhuma
invisible a lot.
menção
And this is not
Mas, de novo,
any
como
kind of
consciência
mystical
humana,
mention, but as a
nós
human
compartilhamos
consciousness,
de
we
um plano
share
mental coletivo.
a mental
Então, imaginemos
collective plan.
substrato,
So let us imagine a plane.
uma analogia
So let us imagine
substrato, substrato,
a substract, and in somewhere in that substract we put some kind of impulse. So not only to the chemical reaction that begin in those recipients, they will do this. They will generate like a diffusion of matrices. I think I have a certain conviction after so many years that this actually pacifies us a lot. It pacifies us because it makes us come to think that I shouldn't have the pretension of changing the world. Firstly, I need to consolidate the change that I need in me, and as I go through the circles that I interact with, I can lead some message, some example, but this impulse of reflecting and discerning, really, we look to the last 3 decades, because all this started with a lot of violence, other kinds of communication that came after that. So today I interact with many young people in different situations, both from Geneva as in Africa, young people from both regions, and you can see that in what is taken as the poorest or the most precarious, a much more real human being, an experienced human being, someone that looks into your eyes and talks to you, not someone that is hiding on the other side of some technology. Sorry for the expression, but when you meet them in real life, you can barely have some visual communication. So this is something very grave that we are going through today, and through public lectures we can have an awakening, a broadening in the consciousness, and I am sure that in the face of the human process as the whole collective, this has much more value than thousands of likes somewhere in some post that is neutralizing adults, burying the alive, young people, the mature ones. Again, this doesn't have a final period. This point, I think it's fundamental for the youngest, the missions that the oldest may have of giving the examples. I would change the word, if you allow me, the older for more matured, because there is a thought that tries to destroy something that always existed in ancient cultures, ancient Eastern peoples. It was only known that a more mature age is the synthesis of that, to give the maximum potential for those seeds that are beginning to be a good amount of light, a good amount of water. I just changed the word to. This is why in Japan the most mature professors and teachers, that they don't retire, they start to teach the youngest ones to pass this example. So I think this is very important for the most mature ones, to give the youngest ones some examples. They need a lot of help. This is the reality. I taught in Africa, I taught in Jordan, I taught in Africa, and I have this empathy
troca
this is a very interesting exchange of information that we have with those people in those continents.
importante, são mais
This is
puros
very important.
do
They are purer
conceito
from the point of view of.
Muito obrigado pela sua palestra.
Obrigado também.
Frei.
Thank you a lot for your
Mais
lecture,
alguma
Friar.
pergunta no salão?
Do we
Tem
have
no
any
chat?
other questions?
Sim. Tem alguma no chat?
Do we have any questions
Mais só um pouquinho.
in the chat?
Só um pouquinho.
Hold on.
No chat tem duas perguntas correlatas.
We have two
Poderia fazer.
questions
A Fabiana
in the chat.
Niedermayer pergunta:
Fabiana
como podemos
asked,
acolher nossos
how
sentimentos
can we
quando o outro joga
embrace our
responsabilidade para
feelings when
nós?
others
Nesse mesmo sentido,
throw
Sandra Calvi
responsibilities on us?
Frei,
And Sandra
nesses
Calvi
casos
also
de jogo de
asked, in
responsabilidade,
these,
a neutralidade barra silêncio é a melhor conduta?
is neutrality and silence the best behavior? Oh, such a simple question, right?
Veja,
Look,
quando nós vamos amadurecendo e realmente
when we mature and really
ou identificando que a responsabilidade muito
discover
mais do que um peso, ela é um dever.
what responsibility
Essa
is,
responsabilidade vai sendo consolidada
that
com os nossos
responsibility will be
valores.
consolidated
Essas
with our
situações
values,
deveriam ser
and
dissolvidas.
those situations should be dissolved.
E a cada situação,
And at
nós
each
podemos
situation,
discernir
we can
se é melhor o
discern
silêncio ou se é melhor
either
o
silence or dialogue is better, but
Não. Só nós podemos querer
only
ter diálogo
we
construtivo.
can
Nós podemos decidir,
decide
ter uma conversa
to have
construtiva e
a
aprender
constructive talk and learn how to listen.
Os diálogos que tivemos hoje, estamos realmente escutando.
In all the dialogues that we had today, were we really listening, or were we only present physically as a protocol and out of politeness in the face of others, but to be attentive to listen? We can learn much more about life, about everything, about many contents, if we are open to listen, truly listen. So the topic of feelings is delicate because humanity, as well as in the mental plane, we are also submerged in the collective astral, or in this collective emotional plane. Who here doesn't enter somewhere and you suddenly you notice something telling you don't go in there, the environment is very heavy, or you had some kind of fear, it's the word that I avoid to say, something that you avoid, some feeling of tension, agitation, depression. That is our emotional body, that is more expansive than our physical body. Then it can interact in a much broader field of the physical plane. So imagine in how this can be strong and present. So this is why we must work a lot to take on this responsibility also for the construction of, so that we can have an impersonal basis. But we have a hint, I don't know if it's a hint, but a reflection that can help us is because we associate a feeling with someone, right? Or a feeling with something, and not something for the superior feeling itself. The feeling of harmony or well-being, it shouldn't be directed to anyone. Or why should I direct well-being for those who are beside me in my own home, or and does my neighbor need the same too? But if I consolidate superior feelings when the situation like this of tension arrives in the more internal environment in my human experience, then I will have a more solid way of living with that in a more constructive way. So we always go to the same place, reflection, silencing. We should be careful with silencing because it could mean many things. We could silence in order to not nourish a conflict. We could silence out of convenience. We could silence out of inertia. So instead of striving to add something in that environment, as I was saying before, for you to put a code there to generate a positive chemical reaction. Oh, I'll just be silent because it's more convenient, or I just want to not expose myself, so I won't do anything. It's a responsibility of us of not collaborating for something to be different. So it depends a lot. It's not very constructive to answer in a general way something that is so specific, because it would be unfair with the collection of information here. Well, Friar, how can we gestate the will? How can we nourish that will? Because when we receive the impulse of a lecture, of a good book, of a constructive situation that life brings us, that emerges, you can feel that almost physically, awakening within us. But then, after that, it dies, it goes away. The point is the following. We have an inner nature that is more or less connected to this archetype of will. Whatever our tendency of temperament is, there is something that helps us a lot there, which is for us to assume what we are, what we have, just like it is. In other words, nothing lacks me. If I don't go in this understanding that I lack nothing, I cannot be adhered with the energy of will. And society, as we were saying before, it always makes us believe that something is lacking, that we lack something, so we go buy some detergent and we end out of the supermarket with 5 carts. Why is that? I click a link to see something, then I go through it, and then I went to the other side of the world. I don't even know where I started at. Why is that? Because this concentration is tendency to always think that something is lacking, that we lack something, we need more things. Many opportunities of everything that we need, and I'm talking about the consciousness here, not about material things. Many of the things that we need is to be before us at this very moment, but something within us judges that to be outside of us at some moment, a situation that will never happen, so we are always out of place for what life is bringing us today. This is called ingratitude, in other words. So just give thanks for anything, for those who came here, for those who didn't, for those who liked. This doesn't make any difference, because nothing is lacking, because the synthesis of this makes so we don't maintain that will, because we always think that something is lacking us. We're always lacking something, right? If I want something, then I want something else. If I have 2 of them, then I have 5. If I don't, it's never enough. So with this, my experience will weaken, and I will lose contact with reality, because reality is what is happening with me at that moment. And this question was very good, because it will lead us to a very important situation, which is the human potential for adaptability, which we have, and it's getting lost a lot. That adaptability, it doesn't mean submission or being passive. Let's understand the concepts of this. But we have the possibility of adapting to things just as they are, in the context that they are, and my potential, that is also the energy of will emerge naturally, because it is a conjuncture, a chemical reaction that will make a synthesis. But if I do not place my presence there and my capacity of adaptability, that will miss my presence there. I don't know if you could accompany this analogy. The experience of each one of us can only be experienced with us present, but someone could say, oh, it's obvious. It's obvious, but we don't live it. We're always somewhere else. We're always doing something else. Not in the present. We should be in the present to
Então nós perdemos muito
So
essa capacidade
we
de adaptação.
lose this capacity of adaptability a
Faz parte
lot.
desse programa
And
aí
it's part
de
of this
manipulação. Não é o tema de hoje, então
program
nós
of
vamos
manipulation.
continuar
It's not
com
today's topic, so we're not going to
Temos mais
talk
alguma
about it.
pergunta?
Do we have any other questions?
Vamos ver se tem alguém, se não, vai para o professor Tunis de novo. Tem alguma pergunta no chat?
Do you have any
Nós
questions in the
vamos para a
chat?
última, tá?
Então, Alessandro, um pouco correlata com as perguntas anteriores. Alessandro,
It's a
aqui
little bit
pergunta,
about the
"Possível
previous
agressões
questions.
as
I
imperceptíveis no
receive
dia a dia na empresa em que
And
trabalho,
imperceptible
quando tento
aggressions
sugerir
in the
melhorias, sou visto como errado,
place where I
me
work,
fazem
and when I
aceitar
try to
aquela
make things
situação.
better, I am
Como
seen as
fica o
the wrong
silêncio
one,
nessa
and I
situação?
how can I
Olha, você está se permitindo
how can
ser
I
agredido.
deal with this? Well, you are allowing yourself to be
Ninguém tem o
aggressed.
poder de nos agredir.
In deep down, no one
Sua
has the
reação
right
a essa agressão que está
for
te ferindo, não é exatamente
hurting
a agressão
you.
do outro. Experimente mudar de atitude.
Try to change your
Compreender
attitude.
que se
Try
realmente
to
não tem
understand
motivo,
if
e se é a
there
opinião
isn't
ou
some
iniciativa do
reason
outro, isso
or
está
if
acontecendo fora de você.
others' opinions and decisions are happening.
Se queremos estar em
This is
paz
happening
com
outside of you.
nós
Why
temos
is this
que
affecting you?
reagir bem
If you want to be
conscientemente e
at
nessas
peace with your
circunstâncias,
consciousness, we should
estar em paz.
act.
Se o senhor tem uma opinião, com todo respeito,
If
é a opinião do outro.
someone
Eu sei que
has
não é
some
simples na prática,
opinion,
mas para
with
ajudar
all
você a
respect,
fortalecer
it's their
sua
opinion.
consciência,
I know it's not as
pense desse
easy.
ponto de vista. Então, isso só lhe fere porque você está
Think
dando
about it.
poder,
It's only
você
hurting you
está
because you're giving
nutrindo,
the power, you're nourishing,
transferindo a
you
força para o outro.
transferring that strength
Não
to
para sua própria
others and not
capacidade
to your
de ser o que
own
você é.
capacity of being who you
Quem sabe
are.
não chegou o momento de você mudar
And
de vida.
perhaps it's the moment for you to change your job, right?
Última pergunta, professor.
The last question, Professor.
Mas também uma pergunta.
One more comment, but also a question. We know that the planet and humanity
Cada vez mais acelerado,
are
muito acelerado
more
em tudo.
accelerated in everything. The
Viagens,
economy,
comunicação,
commerce,
etc.
travels,
Hoje quase
communication,
9
etc. We're almost 9
Da forma
billions
como
today,
nós
and
estamos
in the
caminhando
way that we're
no
walking
planeta, é muito
on the
claro que
planet,
do
it's
ponto
very
de
clear
vista
that from the
termodinâmica, nós vamos ir
thermodynamic point of view, we will go
sistema que é chamado
towards a system that is called
sistema irreversível do ponto de
an
vista
irreversible
termodinâmico, e nós
point.
podemos
It's a
ter uma catástrofe
thermodynamical
que
way,
vai
and we
fazer
could have a
até
catastrophe that
desaparecer
could
esse
even
Então,
make
isso é
the human
complexo.
species disappear. So
Eu
this
acho
is
que essa
complex. Do you think
reflexão
that
e a
this
possibilidade
reflection and the possibility
teria a capacidade de
would
desacelerar,
have
porque nós
the
precisamos
possibility to
desacelerar. O
this
professor falou
accelerate
recentemente
what
essa
you just said
capacidade de
recently
adaptação
about the possibility of
espécie
adaptability of the
a novas
species
situações,
to
até
new
por causa da
situations, even
capacidade
because
que
of
nós
the
temos no
capacity
nosso
that
cérebro,
we have in
está se
our
perdendo
brains.
exatamente
It's
por
getting
causa
lost
dessa
exactly
pressão.
because
Mas
of
a
this pressure, but
velocidade do
the
processo
speed
impressionante
of
do
this
ponto de vista.
process is impressive
Será? O senhor acha que é possível
this point of view.
reverter
Do you
com
think that it would
com
be
essa reflexão?
possible to reverse this with this reflection? Professor, actually the planet is going through a very specific cycle, a very specific moment, right? From all points of view. And we as a human group, as a humanity, in a stage that we have never experienced before from also many points of view. So each one in their comprehension, I will go back again to that previous conclusion. It's very important for each one to have their experience because, again, even if it happens, and it will be unavoidable, as something global. Also in that selection, who can mirror, can reflect, I will reverse, who can start to find the true human matrix will enter the new vibration of the planet, because today we live in a situation of a mental, emotional, physical compression. The planet as a being in evolution, it is walking towards an expansion of what we call as the intuitive world, the fourth dimension world, from the positive point of view. So it won't be useful to be fighting against all this that is very destructive and manipulative. It's good to keep the code that you have and to sow that code wherever it's possible, or to be the the
ciência,
trigger of a
e aí
good
vai fazer o seu trabalho.
chemical
As
reaction
expectativas que nós
and that
vamos
will
uma massa bastante grande,
do
não?
its work
Será com muitas
without having
regras,
expectations, because 90
isso,
billion people is a very big
e essa
mass.
mudança vai ser possível. Agora, a chave aqui me
But the
parece ser o
key here
seguinte,
is the following,
é
it
uma
seems to
armadilha
me.
que muitos de nós caímos.
It's a trap
Não
that
vale a
many of
pena,
us fall
vamos
into.
esforçar
Oh,
para quê? Com
it's
tudo
not
isso, então, se tá tudo
useful.
igual,
Why
tudo
will I
deteriorado,
strive if everything is
mas
deteriorated?
entrar na
It's
corrente,
simple to
já
just
bom,
join
carnaval já tá.
the current and be dragged and
Carnaval da vida humana, não
participate
carnaval,
carnival.
o evento
I'm
em
talking
si.
about carnival
Mas se
in
cada
analogy,
de
not
nós que se
carnival
considera
itself,
uma
but
consciência de
if
si,
each one of us that
manter esse seu código
consider
límpido,
ourselves as
límpido,
someone
honesto,
awakened to keep our
transparente,
code
sem medo,
honest
proporção, e colocando ali
and
o código
to
nesse substrato,
put that code in that
infelizmente
substract
está se
that
tornando cada vez mais
is
amorfo,
unfortunately becomes
a consciência humana. Isso, chegando numa massa crítica, fará
reaching
diferença.
a critical mass, it will make the difference.
Todos nós, no fundo, sabemos isso.
We all know this deep down.
Vou evitar a palavra luta, porque eu não
I
gosto de
will, I
falar.
will avoid the
Mas
word
o struggle,
fight,
que é uma palavra em inglês que não
but
tem tradução
struggle
e compreensão,
that doesn't have
essa tensão
translation, in my
que
opinion,
leva muitos a desanimarem e desistirem. Esse
is
que é o ponto, temos que
something
vigiar.
that leads us
Então,
to
a
fail
vida
many
é
times and
persistir,
give up. So
persistir
the thing
como
is
se
to
nada,
persist,
como se
persevere
nada.
as if nothing,
É semear como se
to
nada.
sow as if nothing.
Nosso problema não é eventualmente
Our
colher o
problem
fruto,
is not to
nem ver aquela
eventually
planta
harvest
saborosa.
the fruit or
Nosso
seed
ponto é
that
cultivar a
plant
qualidade genética desse projeto
blooming.
humano, essa
The point
semente
is to
autêntica,
keep,
semear.
protect this authentic seed of human race, to sow it, and our part will be done.
Isso eu acho que é muito esperançoso,
I think that this
muito
is
pacificador.
this brings a lot of hope
A
and
onda coletiva é
is
muito
peacefying,
negativa,
because when the wave is very negative
e
and
só
very
pra concluir,
destructive,
voltando à sua pergunta anterior,
and just to conclude, going
nós
back to your
aprendemos
previous
então a dar
question,
mais
is first
tempo a
to
isso,
learn how to give
nossa
more time to
consciência,
this in our
menos
consciousness
tempo a essas
and less
interações,
time to all those
porque senão,
interactions,
dentro
because
sem querer,
otherwise,
essa
without
semente começa a
wanting
receber
to,
esse ácido
that seed
mais
will
fácil.
receive that
E
acid,
essa vai
I
entrando como
call it as
refinada
acid,
e
that
vai
acid will
diluindo
enter
tudo que é valor,
and will
tudo que é
dilute all
princípio.
kinds of values,
Quando
principles,
esse A chega
and
na
that
proteína,
will reach the
a essência da
protein,
essência,
which is the essence of of
simbolicamente sempre,
this.
estamos falando da consciência.
Symbolically, we're talking
Chega na
about the conscious.
proteína,
It reaches the
eles vão ser mais
protein and will be just one more of those
e não
9 billion,
mais pro
and
que
not
vem
one
aí,
more for
uma
what
nova
is coming,
expressão
which is a
da
new
vida no
expression for life on the
Nosso consciência
planet.
tem a ver com
So
isso.
our consciousnesses have
Está
to
se
do with
diluindo.
that. What is
Nosso caminho
deluding
é
has its
Nosso processo
destined
é não
path.
focar
Our
na
process
visão,
is not
entrar
to
nessa tensão,
enter
colocar energia
that
no que é
tension
positivo.
and put energy
Acho
in
que
what
isso
is
coloca nossa
positive.
energia
I
no
think
lugar
that this
certo,
places our
preservamos
energies
nossa
to the
energia
right
e
place.
vamos
It
adiante.
protects our energies, and let's carry on.
Bom, muito obrigado a todos,
Well, thank you
presentes
all
aqui, também os que
very
estão
much, all those,
conectados no canal da Irdin
all of
Editora.
you present here, and
Temos a
also
palestra
all
no dia
those watching
14
us
em São
through
Paulo,
from Irdin Publishing. So
quiserem
we will
acompanhar,
have a new
no
lecture
canal da
on
Irdin, haverá uma difusão
the
também nas redes
14th.
sociais
If you
da
want
Irdin.
to accompany that,
E pronto, eu também
you
acabo sem ponto
and
final,
well,
sempre 3 pontinhos.
I'll
Já
end
estamos
with our
juntos,
final
processo
period.
expansivo.
And as we live, the process is always expansive, and we went like this with a smile. So have a good Saturday, a good weekend, and thank you.